Hello, everybody, and welcome to Striving for Authenticity, the Global LGBT Plus Jam. We are IBM, and we're really excited to be here today to talk to you about our Global LGBT Plus report and the research and findings that went into it. So my name's Ella Slade. My pronouns are they and them. I work within diversity inclusion at IBM as IBM's Global LGBT Plus leader. And I'm joined today by Anthony and Marine. So Anthony, do you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to, and it's really terrific to be here, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Anthony Marshall, as Ella indicated. So I lead thought leadership at IBM. So there's an organization in IBM called the IBM Institute for Business Value, which does business thought leadership primarily, although of late we've gone into several other areas, including diversity, which has been very exciting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We do a whole range of thought leadership that we use a lot of empirical proprietary surveying, share that with the community, share that with our clients, and so really happy to be here and share it with you today.
Great, and my name is Marijn Pijnenburg. I'm Dutch. I cover IBM's global marketplace diversity and LGBT business development team. My pronouns are he, him, his, and we've been working with the IDV to extend this global jam globally, get way more people, leaders as VIPs participating, and it was really a pleasure to connect with the whole team and making this a very successful first ever global LGBT jam. So thanks a lot for being here.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll now get started. So striving for authenticity, LGBT plus views on enduring discrimination and expanding inclusion. So yes, this was a collaborative effort between IBM, Out and Equal, and Workplace Pride as well. So I'll now kind of hand over to Anthony to explain a little bit about the JAM, the IBB survey data, and then we can move on to get into a bit more detail.
That's great. And before I start here, I just want to call out the amazing collaborative partnership that we've had with Out and Equal. It's been a tremendous experience working with the team and the extended team to produce this piece of thought leadership to host the jam. And so it's just been unequivocally successful, I think, for everyone. And we've really surfaced a lot of really valuable insights. So what is a jam? Well, a jam is an engagement tool where people can come across a period of time. In this case, I think we went for almost 2 days around the world. So we had Follow the Sun, people engaging all the time. Basically, it's a moderated environment with several topics that we'll talk about shortly, where people can come in and they can engage in dialogue in a chat environment, which is real time. We've got VIPs coming in, going, providing their insights, so people can organically move between topics and provide their input. And it's just been a tremendously safe and open environment for individuals to share their experiences, for us to really to get the nuance, where we do surveying on topics like this, but we don't really get the nuance. And this is really ability to get the nuance of experience while also building the community, and having an additional forum for the community to engage. And so in that sense, it's been extremely valuable. It's a tool that IBM has been using and developed and been using for this type of thing for many years now. And in this exercise, we combined it with proprietary surveying. So we also went and did some surveying on the topics of diversity. We originally started with about 7,000 survey participants, which is all double blind, so we don't know specifically who they are. They were professionals, so they were leaders, either executives or entrepreneurs or senior or junior managers. And we asked in that, for people to self-identify whether they self-define as LGBT plus. And we ended up getting around 750 individuals that did, and that allowed us the data in order to do some really deep analysis about comparative experiences between people that define themselves as LGBT plus, and also other personal characteristics such as race, gender, identity, and the like, in order to really explore intersectionality as well, in terms of experience and some salient facts that we were able to compare. Ella.
Right. So moving on to kind of talk a little bit more in detail about the jam. Now, I had never participated in a jam before, and Anthony was very kind and patient with me in terms of explaining what that experience was going to be like. And it was truly special, I think, 34 hours in terms of just being able to collaborate with so many incredible people from around the world. Mariah, I know that we've talked before about the importance of so many amazing guest speakers that we had as part of the jam. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit here.
Yeah, it was amazing. So we reached out to partner NGOs such as Out and Equal, but in other countries around the world, and asking their leaders to join this jam. And for them, it was also a whole new experience in getting into this environment, being able to share and connect their ideas, getting feedback, reacting to other people that were reviewing the variety of topics that you'll explain on later. But this sense of community around the world and bringing those leaders and insights together, creating ideas and sparking creativity, that was a really unique experience, I found. And afterwards, many of the leaders came back to me and said they find it very engaging, very inspiring, and an excellent way to develop new ideas and connect with this network all around the world. So it was a pretty awesome experience indeed, Ella.
Yeah, it was really amazing. We've got a few kind of stats here in terms of the number of people that were part of the jam. It really was amazing. We had almost 2,000 unique logins, just over 3,000 registrants as well. You can see the kind of breakdown by geography. The majority were in the US, but we still had that global reach. And like we said, it was 34 consecutive hours. So whilst, the folks in the US were fast asleep, folks in other parts of the world were jamming away and coming up with some new fantastic ideas. So it really was amazing. In terms of a bit more about the demographics of the people that were part of the jam, we had 7% of jam participants identified as non-binary, and of those jam participants, they contributed nearly 14% of the content, which was really fantastic to see. And then again, 14% of jam participants identified as transgender too. So it was really good to see that diversity within our jam participants as well.
Yeah, Ella, one of the things that really struck me is that people stayed for an average of 6 hours, which is, compared to other jams, it was huge. It just showed the level of commitment and engagement. We do jams across multiple topics in the IBV. We recently had one on gender. We had a jam last year on mental health, which is so important in COVID. And it really just enables this environment enables people to really share very personal experiences. I just found it so compelling. Ella, what was your experience in that as well?
Absolutely. The connections that people were making, considering the majority of people in there didn't know one another, but we were just absolutely bonding straight away and coming up with lots of ideas, but also not only thinking about ideas to improve LGBT plus inclusion in the workplace, but also just sharing our own experiences. I was one of the lucky enough to be one of the facilitators for the trans and non-binary belonging area that we were talking about. And under that, there was a whole thread of people just talking about how they came to understand their own identity. And it was fantastic to see that unfold and to also see people's own understanding actually developing and growing as a result of the jam and the other conversations that were happening. So yeah, I thought it was incredibly powerful. And, people are still talking about it lots today. And can we do more? Can we do more? Because it really, really was just such a special event. Fantastic. So I'll move us on then. So we did the jam. The IBV team did all their research as well, and that kind of came together into our LGBT plus report, Striving for Authenticity. So what we then wanted to do is to kind of take you through some of the key findings from that report. So we started at the beginning of the report by talking really about the trans experience. And we really picked on a lot of the outcomes from the JAM for this, and a lot of the stuff that was said as part of the JAM, and also some kind of other external research too. So to just call out a few kind of key statistics here about the trans community. So more than 25% of trans people have lost a job due to bias. So when we're talking about the workplace, this statistic really sticks out to us as being something that we really need to focus on. And then 46% of trans people have at least some difficulty making ends meet, compared to 37% of LGBTI people overall. So again, really interesting when we think about our workforce and when we're thinking about workplace inclusion when it comes to the LGBT plus community. It really shows that additional focus that is needed on supporting our trans siblings. And then just a few kind of quotes that came from the JAM from some of our trans participants. We had quotes such as, to be candid, I admit I'm afraid of the backlash of coming out in my transition, how that will affect my career as a leader. So, that whole thing around job security is huge. And, if you're fearful of your employer discriminating against you, especially due to you being transgender, it just adds even more stress there as well. And then the last quote down here was really nice, that the fact that I'm employed and can openly live as transgender and work has made me stronger and more determined. So it's interesting seeing someone that's not out and how they're feeling, and then someone that is out and clearly thriving. So a whole range of experiences were shared from the trans community as part of the JAM, and it was really fantastic to see and to hear all of those really powerful voices. So the rest of the report was kind of broken down to 3 key areas. So we wanted to just take you through each of those key themes that really emerged from all of our findings today. And then towards the end of our discussion today, we'll talk through what does this mean for you all within your organizations? What are some kind of key actionable takeaways that you can implement within your own organization? And what are we doing at IBM as well? So to get things started, so the first section was around fostering visibility, inclusion, and authenticity. So this was a really interesting section, and I'm just going to talk quickly to this stat here on the left, the right, sorry. So this is basically that roughly 2 in 3 LGBT people say that they've been disadvantaged due to their identity. So this was focused on sexual orientation, obviously here, but basically saying that these people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual do feel like they are more disadvantaged compared to their non-LGBT kind of counterparts in society. And there's just a couple more kind of statistics here as well, such as 92% of LGBT people say that discrimination exists in US society against those who share their sexual orientation. So, I mean, that is huge. I think this was, for me, one of a pretty staggering takeaway from the report was, we always feel like we're making progress in the LGBT plus inclusion space. And even though we know that we have a long way to go still, actually hearing that it is still a very, very real issue. And these stats are so clear in illustrating that story really is powerful.
And it's really,
I don't know.
it's really interesting, Ella, because this was not a representative sample of the wider community. This was a sample specifically of business leaders, if you will, right? So it was C-suite executives, and it was entrepreneurs and senior managers, in effect, and junior managers on their way to becoming senior. These are very empowered individuals, right? And so you would expect that the people that we surveyed, had some power, and yet even that group of individuals, an empowered group of individuals, still feel this way about the wider community. So that suggests to me, at least, that if we did a wider survey, which we might do in the future, it would be potentially even worse than this.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable.
And specifically in some other parts of the world than Anthony, in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and even in Europe, leaders face this discrimination and are very careful about coming out as LGBT or maybe in a closed circle, but not for a wide audience or in public. So we see still that.
Yeah, definitely. And this is just some quotes from the jam, some kind of voices. I mean, this really helps to bring to life some of these issues that we're talking about here. The first one is I feel really included when I see that my voice impacted a decision within the company. It's the difference between being talked at versus being talked with. I think this really just highlights the importance for all of us within organizations at making sure that everybody is included and heard, and then we act on what we hear as well. Was there anything else for either of you two that kind of stuck out from the jam in terms of this kind of fostering visibility, inclusion, and authenticity?
Just this duality of personal experience and the perception of the experience of the wider community being even worse than one's personal experience, and just it was very interesting to see the disadvantage that is still seen despite all of the improvements and things that we've seen over the years. There's still a lot of inherent disadvantage. Let us be broad in that, using that word, that's experienced.
And I was also much impressed with how some of the leaders actually overcame that throughout their career, how it enhanced their leadership, their experience, and how they helped their organization sometimes too, and shared that journey with us in the jam. That was, for me, very moving.
Absolutely, absolutely. So moving on to the second section of the report then, which was all about intersectionality, and we were very fortunate to be able to get such rich data here about intersectionality. And we really here we're talking about how different parts of everyone's identities kind of come together and overlap, and how that impacts the discrimination that people face. So this data to the right here is on about, compared to the general US population, the group that had all three characteristics, so race, gender, and sexual orientation, the same as me, is less or more successful. So if we, obviously we can see the, when we look at Black LGBT people and Native American LGBT people, you can really strongly see that people who are Black and LGBT, or Native American and LGBT, strongly feel that people with the same identity as them are less successful. And when you go down and compare that to LGBT people as a whole, or even when you compare it to white LGBT people, or you can really see that difference there. So 18% versus 70%. It really is staggering to see how that that intersectionality comes to life here in terms of these statistics.
Maybe we should just sort of speak specifically why it's not LGBT plus in the data. And one of the things that we were trying to access and get engaged with the entire community. We did have the option of non-binary and also trans in the survey. It was just really hard to within a formal sort of environment of surveying to have people self-identify for whatever reason. We just struggled to get to get access to those individuals to be able to get rich data, which is why we're saying LGB here, which is why it was so important to complement this surveying with the JAM to get that rich data and insight and experience through the JAM with that community. We're experiencing exactly the same thing with some other communities right now, where it's very hard to do formal surveying and get to those communities. And so the JAM, working with organizations such as Out and Equal, that can help engage with the community more directly, provides a really unique opportunity to get insights and experiences of specific communities that you wouldn't normally be able to get through traditional surveying mechanisms if we're going through our normal surveying partners. And so I think the complementary aspect of that in this study and with the JAM has been incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. It really has. And I'm really glad that we were able to just put so much effort into the jam and into making sure that the trans content and the fact that we had the whole section as part of the jam for trans and non-binary belonging was yeah, incredibly powerful. So even though it's not quite included in this data here, it still was very much part of the report too. So totally agree.
And it just means that we've got to find better ways of getting to communities through formal mechanisms. That's part of the challenge. And that's part of, the recommendations. We've been talking a lot up until now about issues and challenges, but we're going to segue to opportunities right now. And part of the opportunity, even in our formal surveying mechanisms, going through sort of the traditional surveying organizations. We need to do a better job. They need to do a better job in really getting to the broader and more specific communities in that effort. So that's something that was a learning point for us through this. Then we need to find better ways of engaging specific communities.
Absolutely, totally agree. So we've got a few more kind of stats and kind of questions around the intersectionality piece that really came out quite strongly in the report. So the first section to the left is really all about, intersectionality in action. So the question that was asked as part of this was, to what extent have you personally experienced discrimination because of your sexual orientation? And you can see along the kind of sliding scale from none to very little extent to a real great extent on the other side as well, and just how that changes when we're looking at different identities here as well. And we see, this 40% down here, 45% down here of somewhat great extent for Black LGBT people, and kind of similar kind of high numbers when it comes to our Pan-Asian friends or Native American folks as well, facing that discrimination. When then we compare to our non-LGBT people who obviously, very little extent does sexual orientation come into the discrimination they face as well. And similarly over to the right hand side, this one was particularly interesting around what is driving discrimination. So the audience was asked, what aspect of your personal identity has been the primary driver of discrimination that you have faced in the workplace? This is specifically focused on the workplace. But I mean, you can even just see at a glance that sexual orientation has really come out on top here in terms of across the board, almost pretty much, except for non-LGBT people, which I guess is to be expected. We can see that sexual orientation was the highest driver of discrimination, with gender being pretty close behind. But that really was interesting to see. And we can see for some folks, race, ethnicity played a big part in it too. But still interesting to see that sexual orientation came out the strongest here.
Yeah, and just thinking about when this survey took place, given the scale of the survey of 7,000 individuals, it took several months to complete this survey. So it actually went through the cusp of last year into this year, and there were some very difficult times last year, particularly in North America, and race was at the top of the headlines, and a lot of exploration of the experience of race was really highlighted. And even within that context of people being surveyed about their identity, sexual orientation came through as even stronger cause of discrimination and disadvantage, which was really, really interesting, because I don't know, it was a flashpoint. And even within that very difficult, not that things have necessarily improved, but that very difficult period of time, that the community sort of highlighted sexual orientation was very, very telling.
Yeah, definitely. So just a few kind of quotes that came out quite strong here. Again, was that being an ally is simply practicing and hearing and seeing someone accurately. I thought that was really nice. I love the idea of hearing and seeing people and truly seeing people is lovely. The next quote then, so one has to be flexible and able to quickly adapt and adopt new language to their vocabulary. What was considered correct yesterday could be totally wrong today. we all know this to be true. You know, language evolves all the time, and it was really nice that someone highlighted that, because I think that goes across the board of all different types of identities. We're constantly learning about the correct language to use, and how that changes and how that shifts, and also how personal that can be as well, and learning from one individual to the next what language they prefer to be referred to as well. So this was an interesting one that came out too. And then the final quote then here from another JAM participant said, "It all comes down to values. Values are what you do, not what you say you will do. Look at a company's actions." And that's a super powerful one, and one that I really really love and really like, and want to make sure that, you know, we as IBM are sticking by that as well, that we're not just, you know, talking the talk, we are walking the walk as well. So yeah, I definitely would agree with that final point. So on to the third section of the report. This was really around expanding corporate support and individual allyship. So looking at those kind of corporations and those big employers. So of our JAM participants, our JAMers, we asked our participants, what grade would you give your employer for their efforts to promote LGBT plus diversity and inclusion at your company? And you can see the results I was expecting slightly higher, if I'm honest. So yeah, so it was interesting to see that even though, you know, the majority was kind of an A grade or a B grade, so the kind of higher grades, we still have those that are kind of in the middle, and those that are slightly less satisfied or really dissatisfied there as well. So that really kind of came out here too. And there was lots of great discussions and conversations that came out here about our employers. Okay, so I don't know, Anthony, Marine, if you wanted to add anything on the kind of these points here as well.
So I think these are pretty self-explanatory and support everything else that we've said. So 45% of LGBT people say discrimination exists at their employer. This was a US survey, and so still very high. 43% agree, and so there seems to be pretty much a global recognition that challenges still exist despite all of the improvements that we've seen in legislative terms and community understanding and acceptance. There is still a lot of work to do.
I completely agree, and I think if we just move on to kind of bring some of these stories to life with some of the quotes that we had from the JAM participants. I mean, the first one here is really talking about COVID and the impact of COVID. So it says here that COVID is showing home life much more realistically than the confines of the structured office. As much as this makes some more comfortable, it makes others feel threatened and endangered. I think this is a really interesting quote, and it's really been interesting to kind of do a bit more of a deep dive around COVID and the LGBT plus community, and there is more on that in the report. But yeah, I mean, many people I'm sure will be out in their home life, but not at work. And suddenly, when, you know, the camera is on and you're letting people into your life, it becomes very difficult to hide certain parts of your identity. And the same in reverse is also true. I'm sure many people will be out at work, but actually due to whoever they're isolating, maybe it's family, maybe it's other people, wherever they are living at that point in time in COVID, means that they may not be able to maybe join as many meetings to do with the LGBT plus community as they would have done before, because for fear of outing themselves at home. So it really has put a toll on the community for sure. Then looking at the kind of last quote as well. So the last quote says, "I don't really separate my autistic and non-binary identity. They work together, and I love that. I feel like I'm living evidence of why gender is a social construct." I thought this was particularly powerful, and there was actually a huge thread that happened in the JAM all around being either autistic or some other form of neurodivergent, and trans or non-binary, and just lots of people talking about, very similar to this person here, that they don't necessarily distinguish the two, and they see the two identities as one and together. And I thought that was really powerful and a really interesting perspective as well.
Yeah, and this is an area that we're going to continue working on in terms of our exploration and survey work and analysis with the neurodiverse community. Again, we need to think of creative ways of engaging with the community in a similar way to this experience, but very important to pursue that and to investigate and work collaboratively with that community with a view of servicing opportunities and challenges.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that sounds fantastic and will be really interesting to dig a bit deeper in for sure. So moving on then to the kind of action guide part of the report. So obviously we did all this research and had some fantastic findings, and that's all great. But what can we be recommending organisations do about all of this, and what things should we be really focusing on going forward? So we came up with 4 key areas to focus on. So the first one is around filling the LGBT plus leadership pipeline. So this covers a whole range of activities, from things like corporate sponsorship, mentoring, just really making sure we're elevating our LGBT plus talent and helping them to develop and grow as professionals, both personally and professionally, to continue on through their career. The next one then is set clear expectations for employees. This really all comes down to communication. So communicate the need for respect and the business value of belonging in the workplace. So this really comes around to the messaging of, why does inclusion matter? And ultimately, I always go back to, yes, it's great for the business. Yes, it's great for productivity, all of that nice to have stuff. But ultimately, it's the right thing to do. And that's why it's really important that we're all spreading that message that it is the right thing. The third item then is institute non-discrimination policies and practices. So this bit sounds like it might be the kind of slightly drier kind of topic area for discussion or for action, but actually this is the most interesting and the most important. This is absolutely critical to ensure that your employees not only can thrive in your organisations, but are safe and have those basic level protections that they need to be able to work at your organisation. So this is things like making sure you have gender-neutral restrooms, non-discrimination policies, dress codes. Do you even need a dress code? Get rid of it. All those kind of things that you have in place as really the foundations of employment. And the final one then is around the use of brand eminence as a tool for positive change. So I know Mariah has a lot of expertise in this, so I'll hand over to him in a second. But this is really around how businesses use their brand to make sure that they're looking outside of their organisation to impact change for the LGBT plus inclusion community. So over to Mariah to explain a bit more about that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Ella. And this is indeed a topic in the next level of working on LGBT inclusion. How companies that are active internally and be more outspoken on what they actually do influence not just their own organizations, but also organizations in their ecosystems and the societies they operate in. And I think we gained some very good insights on how organizations are doing that in the JAM and leverage the power of their corporate brand to support LGBT rights around the world, how to speak up, and how employees, and not just employees, but also customers are very grateful for that. But some tips there is ensuring that your organization's government and regulatory affairs teams focus on legislation impact minority groups, affecting your employees or just in general people in the marketplace in the countries that you operate in. I think a very strong advice was in working with your networking groups, ERGs, around the world to stay on top of the latest legislation, the developments, whether it's pro or anti-LGBT rights, because they often provide this unique insight and bridge between the company and trusted advocates. So there's some interesting details in the report as well. So the other tip and recommendation of the report was partnering with other associations, whether it's employer associations, commercial chambers of commerce, NGOs, and explore how you can get in conversation with legislators, with influencers in society, with leaders, support them and their work, but collaborate with all partners in your ecosystem to explore what the best next steps would be to use your influence as a large corporation, a large employer. And there have been some other sessions planned without an equal at this conference on that advocacy, corporate advocacy topic, Ella.
Thanks, Marijn, and thanks for that extra context and background on that really important topic there. Thank you. So now moving on to the final slide then. So, we've talked to you today about the research and about some recommendations on what you can be doing, what other organisations can be doing, but what are we doing at IBM? So we have 4 key areas that we focus on when it comes to LGBT plus inclusion at IBM. I just want to take you through each of them briefly now. So the first one is career development, which nice and neatly aligns to the first action item on the previous slide around filling the LGBT plus pipeline. So this one, so for career development, we're focusing on mentoring. We also have an out role model program, which is specifically to offer development opportunities to the LGBT plus community, such as tickets to the Out and Equal Summit. So hi to all our out role models that are in the session today. And lots of other fantastic things to really make sure that we are developing our talent. The next one then is trans and non-binary support. So this squad has been looking at lots of different things, one of which is the continuation of the rollout of all gender restrooms across the globe. The second kind of area of focus is around we've got a great framework in place to support IBMers when they come out as trans. We're looking at doing a refresh of that at the moment and also making it as widely accessible as possible at IBM. So that help and support is really, really easy for our trans and non-binary employees to access. And then the final area under that is also around education around the trans and non-binary community, really making sure that we're continuing to normalise pronouns, to make sure that everyone's familiar with the right terminology when it comes to trans and non-binary identities. So the next key area for us is around training and allyship. So for this year, we've really been focused more so on manager training and manager allies. So we've been spotlighting and highlighting some of our key allies on our internal kind of gateway pages. We've been really looking at the education that managers receive and how we can make sure that it covers LGBT plus inclusion. We've been guiding them in terms of the goals that they can put in the annual review. So there's been lots of work that's gone into that as well. And then the final area then, and this is very similar to what Marijn was just touching on when it comes to advocacy, but is around our BRGs. So BRGs, we call them BRGs, business resource groups. I know others call them employee resource groups, network groups, whatever you call them. We have over 50 LGBT plus BRGs around the world at IBM. And what we're wanting to do here is make sure that they're all well supported and that they are all able to work with their local government relations teams, their local comms teams, execs, etc., to really make sure that if something does happen when it comes to legislation, whether that's pro-LGBT plus legislation or anti-LGBT plus legislation, they are ready to do something. And more so than that, that they're actually being proactive when it comes to these pieces of legislation as well. So we're really looking at supporting our BRGs here and also making sure that they're ready and are active when it comes to external advocacy as well. So these are our main focus areas. And then also for Pride Month this year, I know that seems like a long time ago now, but we really focused on the theme of we're stronger together. That whole idea that we as the LGBT plus community are stronger when we're supporting all identities in the community. And we are stronger as a society when we are all supporting one another and showing allyship to identities with which we don't identify. So that has been incredibly powerful for us in 2021 as well. So thank you very much. So with that, this has been the last slide. So I just wanted to see if Anthony or Marijn have anything else that they wanted to add before we close things off.
Just reiterating, Ella, what a tremendous experience the partnership with Out and Equal has been. I think it was highly collaborative. Hopefully it was also a very positive experience for the leaders in Out and Equal, also all of the VIPs and hosts and the entire community and everyone that participated in the jam. that made it so valuable. Thank you to everyone, as well as, of course, everyone who is with us today.
Fantastic. Mariah, final words from yourself.
Well, I think the stronger together, that was the essence of the jam. And I really like to thank Anthony and the IBV for facilitating it, for this wonderful report. I like to invite everyone to download the report. And my wish is that we can do another jam sometime in the coming years without an equal, and make it even bigger, covering many, many people and leaders of improving the LGBT community around the world. Thank you.
Fantastic. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. It's a pleasure speaking with you today, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your summit. Thank you.